take a short-barreled FAL, okay, a short-barrel FAL, and make it into a DMR for airsoft? Well, it's a short barrel, so maybe not. It is a 308 though, so maybe that's more of a DMR than this thing is. With obviously FPS upgrades and all that, but so it's a 308, so it's more likely to get approved in a lot of games than the Mark 12 is, okay? Or you could take an SR25 platform, so like an M110, SR25, the 417, various other guns for NATO, and you put a short barrel on it. Is it still a DMR? Should there be a minimum barrel length on that? But then again, you can also, probably the extreme example of that is there was a revolver, can't remember the name off the top of my head, there was a revolver used by GSG-9, which is Germany's counterterrorism unit, that had a bipod attached to a relatively long barrel, bipod, special ammunition, no stock, scope. And that was a DMR, right? Designated marksman. I mean, it's technically a rifle, but because it has rifling in the barrel, but designated marksman pistol. I mean, they used it the same way you would use a DMR. Now, granted, their idea was close quarters, accurate shooting kind of thing. It didn't really stick around very long. On the note of DMR versus sniper rifle, is an M107 a sniper rifle or a DMR? Because it's not bolt action. The real one's not bolt action. But if we're talking length, that thing's massive. It is heavy, it is massive, it is cumbersome. The EOD unit I was attached to tried to not take theirs to Iraq until, they were told to by an officer, because that's how that goes in the military. So, which one's right? Because if we say that this is a DMR, that's great. So we're not saying caliber dependent. Okay, now we can say length dependent because this is the right length for Mark 12, but we're not saying caliber dependent. So then the Scorpion Evo could be a DMR, okay, with a full length barrel and all that. So it's a little wonky, right? If we're saying it has to be issued to a military or police unit, well, then the revolver's in, right? Because that fit. Or the, I think it's the VSS, which I might be wrong on that. I'm still reading up on a lot of Russian specialty weapons, but the 9x39 caliber integrated suppressor, that and scope mount, that was a DMR, right? Or is, if it's still in use, that is a DMR. Another thing that's been used as a sniper rifle over the years was the Browning M2. Carlos Hathcock used the Browning M2 with a scope mount on it in single or in semi-automatic configuration as a sniper rifle. He was actually credited as the first person to use the 50 BMG round as a sniper weapon. Okay, there's some really great stories out there for that. So, is it caliber dependent? Is it length dependent? What's the idea there for DMRs? Sniper rifles, like I said earlier, are a little bit easier. Bolt action, manually operated. Okay, that's a DMR, or that's a sniper rifle. DMRs are a little bit weird, and getting into LMGs, those are also a little bit weird, because what is an LMG? Now, I've been posing this question recently on Facebook groups and things like that for milsim. But what is an LMG? Is it belt fed? Maybe. Is it big caliber? Well, it's got to be at least like an assault rifle caliber, right? Like 5.56 or bigger. Okay, we can all generally agree on pistols are not LMGs. You can't take an MP5, slap a drum mag into it, call it an LMG, have it shoot 450 FPS full auto. No. We can all pretty much agree it has to be a decent caliber. Otherwise, it's a submachine gun, not a light machine gun. But then you get into, okay, what is an LMG actually? Is it the size of the gun? A good representation of that is the RPK-74M versus the RPK-16, which is replacing it. The RPK-74M is full length, 23-inch-ish barrel. Okay, it's a big gun. It is a full-size gun. For reference, by the way, this has a 18-inch barrel, so it'd be even longer than this, right? If you've never really seen an RPK before. Now the issue becomes, well, it's magazine fed, drum fed, magazine fed. So it's not a belt fed weapon. Now people say, oh, just get an RPD. The RPD hasn't been in service since the 60s, at least with Russia. So you're either stuck with the RPK or PKM if you're talking Russian. Is the RPK an LMG in real life? Yes. Is it big? Yes, I would say so. Is it capable of sustained automatic fire and all that? Yes. But the RPK 16 comparatively has a 16-inch barrel, so it's smaller than this, and it has all your fancy rails and stuff like that. That's great. It can have the 23-inch barrel-ish, 23-ish inch barrel of the RPK 74, but that's not what's being sold on airsoft guns. So the airsoft RPK 16, even though it comes with a drum, as far as I'm aware, I'm talking about the AAG version. Is that a LMG? Because it's no bigger than the AK I normally have hanging up behind me. It's smaller than this thing. So, and it's not belt fed. It's a sign I've been talking too long and getting hiccups. So it's not belt fed. Okay. The problem with that is that an LMG? If that is an LMG, why isn't the IAR an LMG? Both of them shoot an intermediate cartridge, both of them are magazine fed, both of them are in real life meant for sustained automatic fire. Both of them do the same thing, fill the same role. There's even been experiments with the RPKs over the years as being a designated marksman rifle in the same vein as a Dragunov. So they both kind of fill the same role. They're both magazine fed. They're both capable of sustained automatic fire, both in airsoft and real life. They're both shooting an intermediate cartridge. So why is it that we allow the RPK but not the IAR? It's a weird one, right? So, and if it's size, a lot of fields are not allowing the RPK 16, where they are allowing the RPK 74. So it's maybe a size thing. Okay. Um, so, which is which. And the RPK-16 has been used by the military, same as the IAR, by the Russian military, the IAR by the US military. So it's not that it hasn't been issued. It's not that it isn't what it claims to be. And a lot of people are saying, oh, it's not an LMG. It is. 100% is. One of the biggest things is like, oh, it can't be magazine fed. Well, frankly, most LMGs in Airsoft are. I'm not sure of any that aren't magazine fed. Let's be honest about that. The 249, for example, it fits into that same criteria. It is a LMG, definitely. So is the IAR, so is the RPK-16, the RPK-74. The SAW is definitely an LMG. And most people will agree with that because can be box fed. But if you take the box out of that, you slap in a mid-cap magazine, is that now an LMG? Or is it a rifleman's rifle or an assault rifle? Okay, it's a weird idea because most of us look at a 249 and say that is an LMG, obviously, but is it? Because if we're going off of the magazine that it uses, whether or not it's belt fed or not, then a 249 or Mark 46 or whatever you want to call it, with a regular magazine in it, a box magazine or Stanton Mag magazine, isn't an LMG. And theoretically, you could even take, a drum magazine, a normal M4 drum magazine, slap it in the side of a 249, right? So is that an LMG? I would say so, because it still fits all the other criteria. To me, belt fed isn't that important because if we look historically, it isn't that important. Starting from the beginning, the single man portable LMGs, or automatic rifles as they've been called in history, and also the IAR, while fitting the designation of an LMG, and also replacing LMGs, or what we would think of as proper LMGs, the IAR is infantry automatic rifle. Automatic rifle is kind of the older term for LMG, because the Browning automatic rifle, was also an automatic rifle. So it's more that automatic rifles are a little more portable compared to what is at the time considered a proper machine gun. Theoretically, maybe that's the distinction, right? Belt feds are definitely machine guns versus non-belt fed, magazine fed are automatic rifles. There isn't really a clear distinction there in historical terms, but the BAR, the Bren gun, the Stoner 63, which is another great example of a gun that is theoretically can be a light machine gun, but it is also an automatic rifle. It takes magazines. It can take a belt, depending on the configuration. So that's another weird one, right? The British, I'm probably going to get this wrong, the L86 LSW or L86A2 LSW, not really sure on that one, is in fact a light machine gun. Has a drum magazine though, doesn't have a belt fed, right? It is a big gun though. Even though it's bullpup, they extended the barrel, put a bipod on it, a whole 9 yards. It's a big gun. So it fits into that same category as the RPK, where it's a big gun, or the RPK-74, it's a big gun, long barrel, magazine fed. Still an LMG. Okay. That is the service LMG, as far as I'm aware, or one of the service LMGs in England. The Germans have the MG36, which is a I think it's a longer barrel. It might not be, but it is the G36 standard or G36K maybe. I know the G36C is the small one, but it's a full-size G36 with a drum mag. So again, that is an LMG in real life. Is it an LMG in Airsoft? Well, Lion Claws seems to think so, but other events might not, right? It is, I think maybe for American milsim. One of the reasons that I bring up those three, though, American milsim, Lion Claws, and milsim West, one, they're the ones I've been able to read, but two, the RPK is approved across the board. So the RPK is approved across the board for those three as an LMG. When the little nuances of FPS and all, and drum capacity and all that, sure, but they're approved across the board. So, and it doesn't specify what model of RPK, if you want to be specific. So RPK 16 should be approved. There was a video that Unicorn Leah put out at using an RPK 16 as an LMG at a Desert Fox event. Okay, so maybe. I would say, if anything, put a longer barrel on it, call it a day. But if the RPK, especially the 16, is approved as an LMG, why not the IAR? Because they fill the same role. They're the same kind of gun in the grand scheme of things. Roughly close in barrel length. The IAR has a fairly long barrel. So it's a weird one, right? I mean, if you look at most of the LMGs, or what would later be called LMGs, if you look at most of them throughout history, especially when you're dealing with World War I, World War II, like for the U.S., for example, the 1919 was not a light machine gun. Okay, now there was a variant which was had a stock and a grip on it, which the Marine Corps experimented with, but largely speaking, it was seen as a crew-served medium machine gun, maybe heavy machine gun, depending on who you ask and who had to carry it, right? But it was realistically not the same role. It filled more of the role of the 240, whereas World War I, World War II, the BAR, or the BAR, Browning Automatic Rifle, really filled the role of the SAW. That was magazine fed. You get the French, the top feeding light machine gun as well, and the brand, it's hard to remember the names of all of these, but you get a lot of them that are magazine fed, and in Airsoft they're all magazine fed. So you're telling me that in order for it to be an LMG, it has to have a belt on it? That's kind of dumb. Maybe I don't want dummy links sticking off to the side. So yeah, LMGs are a weird one, because there's what we think of as LMG, there's what actually exists and existed as an LMG, and then there's game balancing. And really, game balancing is size and weight, right? So if it's not big enough, or if it's not long enough, or if it's not heavy enough, is it still an LMG? Because that's really all we're saying at this point. So yeah, and I mean, you could probably get around it with, different LMGs have different rules. I like what Gun Gamers is considering, which is all the, magazine fed ones are one classification, belt feds are a different classification, and then I think there's the medium machine guns ahead of that. They have a video talking about game development and how they're going to be running their productions, at least gun-wise. So go ahead and watch that if you're interested. Kind of was one of the reasons that I made this video. Okay. So yeah, it's a weird one. What is an LMG? I mean, frankly, across the board, what is an SMG? If I shorten this to honey badger length, throw a drum in there, and shorten or put a PDW stock on there, is that an SMG? Maybe. But then we're saying again, it's determined by length, right? Or whether or not it's actually been issued, right? So if it's something like the MCX Rattler or the Honey Badger, where it's short, it's still shooting a 300 blackout. It's still, so a 5.56 size cartridge. It's still shooting those. Actually, the Rattler that was purchased for JSOC was also purchased in 5.56, although what I've read is that that's only for blank fire training. But so the MCX Rattler it's realistically the replacement to the MP5 for the U.S. military. So is that still a submachine gun? It fits the same role, but it's not a pistol caliber, so it's kind of a weird one, right? But then again, if we're looking at the grand scope of things, what's a pistol caliber, right? Because there are pistol calibers out there that have maybe shorter range, but a heavier grain projectile with more powder than something like a 5.56. So, and are we saying pistol caliber? Does that include revolver calibers? You know, it's a weird one. So, yeah, the 9x39 from Russia, which feeds into the VSS. The VSS is, generally speaking, still thought of as a submachine gun, but it's an equivalent projectile and bullet or casing to some in relation, right? So they took the 9x39, they upscaled the cartridge, or they took, the 7.62x39, upscaled the cartridge to fit a 9mm in there, and now that's the 9x39. Whereas the 300 blackout, they took a 5.56 by 45 cartridge, and they upscaled the casing, or they upscaled the casing to accept the 308 projectile, or the projectile from the 7.62 by 51. So it's the same thing. They took a standard intermediate cartridge, necked up the neck, or increased the size of the neck to accept a larger cartridge. So it's the same thing. The VSS is generally considered a submachine gun. 300 blackout isn't, which is weird. Okay, so there's definitely some double standards there. But then again, if we start saying, okay, it has to be a certain size, it has to be a certain weight, and it has to be, you know, issued, it has to be whatever. So if it's a certain size or a certain weight, then generally speaking, a lot of people who are at least trying to game the system are going to go towards that low weight. So if I say your AR has to be 8 pounds, okay, 8 to 14 pounds. You know, a lot of attachments, I guess, or, you know, full-length M16 with a lot of attachments. Then people will tend to gravitate towards the low-end ones. But then you also get problems like this, which is maybe 4 pounds, 5 pounds would be my guess. but it's still a full-size gun. It's other than the stock right now, it's a fairly accurate representation of a Mark 18, the URGI version. This one still has a polymer receiver, does not have any metal, it doesn't have a metal buffer or buffer 2, but it does have metal, you know, a real foregrip, a scope, this is obviously polymer, the grip there, but so that's probably going to be lightweight compared to the real one. So so I would have to start stacking attachments on it, I guess. So if it's a length and weight, then people are going to go towards what's the minimum. The other problem is that it does tend to outlaw a lot of cheaper variants, right? So the cheapest LMG on the market for airsoft, excluding some built up like IR style guns, the cheapest like clone correct, if you will, LMG is the featherweight 249s. Now that is also super lightweight. So there's a barrier to entry in price, and you're already spending, you know, $100 plus on the ticket. Or do you want to then go buy an LMG that's $500 just because you have to have a metal one, and maybe you're not in great shape, maybe you don't lift, maybe you're like me and disabled. So maybe, like, personally, if I had to pick one, I'd probably go an LMG. I'd probably go for something polymer. Actually, I'm working on a RPK build that is going to be fairly lightweight. That's not trying to game the system. I'm 3D printing parts for it. But it's going to be comparatively much lighter weight than like an M60 or even some of the 249s, like the full metal ones. So, but then again, the RPK is going to be longer than the 249s. And I'm mostly sticking to LMGs on this one, not to say other weapons don't meet the same criteria, but because it's the easiest one to talk about. So is it, you know, so if you set length and weight, like SR25, it has to be, let's say, M110 length, M110 weight. So if you set a high end, low end, then people are going to gravitate towards the low end, unless they either don't care or they hate themselves for milsim reasons, right? I want to carry the big heavy thing. Okay, guy, tell me that in another 24 hours of carrying it, right? So, and then there's the functionality problem of airsoft, especially when you're getting into like DMRs. There's barrel length differences and things like that. So it's a weird one. But with LMGs, you know, so if you set a minimum weight, minimum length, people are probably going to gravitate towards that. If you say it has to be issued, then one, it opens up a lot of weird guns that have been issued over the years. But two, people are going to probably gravitate towards specific guns, specific models, you know, things like that, and you'll see probably less variation there, right? So it's a weird one, and realistically, this video, or these two videos, they'll probably be cut. They weren't so much about trying to solve the issue as they were about trying to bring light to the issue. And I'm not trying to game anything. I'm not trying to be like, oh, look what I can do with this lightweight RPK or whatever. I'm not trying to game anything. If there was a minimum length, minimum weight, I would be building out probably to that, right? But maybe somewhere in between. So it's a weird one. Just bringing it to people's attention, kind of getting some thoughts out there. Kind of just wanted to rant at a camera about this, to get thoughts out of my head and recorded. So yeah, If you have any questions, comments, concerns about this, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you think I'm dumb and all LMGs are belt fed, well, you're entitled to your wrong opinion, but whatever, leave it down in the comments. But until next time, stay safe and stay hydrated.